All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Go Rodeo podcast. I'm your regular host, Garrett Smith, joined by regular co-host, Simon Kuhn. We are not joined this week by regular co-host, Dave Cottle. He's off doing something in uniform, wasting his time doing something in the woods. I'm sure it's a lot of fun. I wish he was back here with us. But in his place, we have a guest co-host, someone from a Rolodex, a good friend for me, if not for everybody on the pod. Simon's just getting to know Alex, but Alex Martin, CEO, founder at a company called Clearspeed, and I am very happy to announce that we are now Marine Corps pure on this podcast. We've gotten rid of all the Army. We've got just Marines on the line. It feels good. It feels like home. The only thing that I could use to make it better is a ice cold Rip It. Alex, do you remember Rip It? Yeah. What's your recollection of Rip It's?
Oh, just it was imperative. Every single day fueled the day.
Yeah. So you don't know this unless you are a dedicated listener of the podcast. But would you say a majority of our podcast, Simon, we try to get a plug in for Rip It in the hopes that they come through with a sponsorship for the podcast?
I think we're on a pretty solid weekly rotation of trying to get that demand signal out into the world.
That's right.
As the world's premier Rip It focused defense tech podcast.
That's right. I do notice though that whenever we talk about Rip Its and try and get them reeled in, you make sure to take a sip from a white monster. So is that just like a?
I'm not buying Rip Its until they send me some.
That's right.
I'm in a soft boycott of the Rip It brand until they acknowledge how much of a torch we carry for them.
They better stand by, They better stand by.
When you get pallets of them delivered to you every week, and it's just this huge, surplus of this no cost, beautiful drink. Yeah, you get a little used to that.
My local gas station's Rip It economy has been devastated by my lack of attention. It's hard times out here by the raceway.
That's tough. Okay. Well, Rip It, if you're listening, we know that you are.
There's still time to come to your senses.
There's still time. Okay, so let's get to know Alex real quick before we get into the agenda for the rest of the conversation. But Alex is co-founder. Co-founder. I don't know how you talk about yourself, Alex. And CEO over at a company called Clearspeed. Before that, he and I served for many years together in the Marine Corps, and we served with some of the greatest. And so we're global war and terror types. Ditto, Simon. So Alex, take us as far back as you'd like to. It doesn't have to be too far back, or it can be all the way back, whatever you prefer. But would love to hear kind of like the quick, 90, 120 second version of you and Clearspeed. And Simon doesn't know you like I do, so stand by for a couple of zinger questions, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm ready for them. No, thanks for having me on here, guys. And this is great to be with some Marines in particular, but also I'm a big fan of this pod, as I am all the stuff you guys put out and you do at Reveal. This was born on the battlefield. You guys know the story. You, at some point after General Petraeus' surge, we started partnering with local forces. So end of 2007, 8, 9, 10. This was how we had to get the turnover accomplished. No one was vetting these people, and I lost one of my dearest friends to an insider attack. So he was, working with the Iraqi army, and one of those folks turned their rifle on him and killed him back in 2008 in November. And that was kind of a very pivotal moment for me, because for many reasons, but the fundamental question was, how does this happen? We were doing so many cool things with technology. We had the weight of all the Department of Defense behind us, but no one had vetted any one of that formation. So 140 plus Iraqi soldiers, 0 people. And it's not the fault of the counterintelligence community. It's not the fault of, anyone who was the humaners, anyone who was looking at that problem. It was just the fault of no one was looking at this and saying, this isn't a find the bad guy problem. This is a clear the good guy problem. And so Clearspeed was started to say, if you invert the problem of risk identification from find the needle in the haystack to clear the hay, what you've done is disrupted an imbalance of resource allocation to favor the high demand, low density counterintelligence folks and allow them to do their very, very hard work on a smaller subset of population. And we do that using voice-based risk assessment. So we deploy automated questionnaires, and we essentially are able to identify and isolate and quantify characteristics known to be associated with risk. We don't know if people are lying. What we do know is essentially if there's been an anomaly in that speech, and that allows us to do is say, this 90x% of population is clear to patrol, clear to work, clear to trust. This other population are not lying to you. They're not all working for Al-Qaeda. They're the population that you should use your counterintelligence people, your lie detectors on. And that's how Clearspeed was started back in 2016, but really born on the battlefield in 08.
So I remember, so we were, you and I started these companies, Reveal on my side, Clearspeed on yours, within maybe a year or two of each other. I remember talking with you very early on in our journey, like, Alex, we're going after defense. And I think you had beat your head against a defense acquisitions brick wall or two. And you looked at me like I was insane. And you said, why the fuck? You know, like, why would you do that? And,
Right.
and so connect for me, like, your national security, kind of like military on the ground learning and the passion that's obvious in your company with an initial decision anyway, to like not go into the defense arena after maybe a trial or two. Like, what can you connect those dots?
Yeah, I guess it starts with the lesson, my biggest takeaway from the Marine Corps kind of, tactically was never say never, never say always. And I guess apply that now to business. You hit me right at a moment in time. I was giving you feedback that I was living through in real time. So it was pretty unfiltered. And at the time it was accurate. But essentially what had happened is we had been on a great path through SoftWorks and through SOCOM to get the technology deployed, to get it in the hands of the end users on the battlefield, to validate the technology. And then the demand signal came very quickly from multiple, sources, not just there, but in other theaters, and then immediately got shut down by the forces of Polygraph, which is a, legacy lie detector system. And so we tried our best efforts to make the case that this is a new thing. This is a triage tool. It's non-determinative. We had a lot of great advocates, both, in the Pentagon and on the battlefield, but it still wasn't enough to overcome just the challenge and the behemoth that was the institutional bureaucracy and idea of change management and the fear that goes along with that of introducing a new thing that certain people weren't a part of, testing and saying, this is mine. And so when we had that conversation, it was at this moment where you realized—
What year was that? Alex, sorry to interrupt. What year was that? There, but it was 2020, 2019?
Yeah, exactly. 2019 was probably that pivotal year. We had spent 2 years in the field. I'd been to Afghanistan almost half a dozen times, maybe more. And we were doing the hard work for the right reason. At the end of the day, it was going to be, hey, if this thing doesn't work for this use case or it's not good, like, I'll pack it up. But when the opposite happens, what causes in the heart of the entrepreneur and the mind of the entrepreneur, and really in the eyes of the investor, is this idea of, it's more than disappointment, right? Like, it's kind of like, you kind of get into this thing where you look at it and you get, the range of emotions from, anger, distrust, you go, but really you can become a cynic. And a cynic is a dreamer with a broken heart, by my definition. And so you dream about creating something can help. And when you're told this could help, and we're not a silver bullet or a magic wand, we're not then, we weren't not today. Nothing can be when you're dealing with human risk. It's so complicated. But if you have something that can buy down risk, more mission assurance rather than credibility assessment, then you say to yourself, like, shouldn't this be just flying off the shelf? And what are the forces at power that are stopping this? And so those were those things that kind of drew this inner cynicism. And the cool thing that happened was you look at the hard realities of the business, where you're burning so much every month on having the singular focus to get something there. And then you just have to say, we have to pivot. Like, we have to move off this thing or we're going to go extinct. And fortunately, we had great investors with a long view and a ton of patience and belief in America and protection of lives, but also they're businessmen and women. And they're like, where else could we use this tool? So we made a pivot. And the cool thing is, as we did that, we said, could we hold on to this as a secondary or tertiary effort so that we could try to get around and work through this because it matters that much? And that's what we did. And now ironically, it's kind of flipping back to the other side on where government is as much of a focus as the enterprise. But yeah, there was a time there when we thought we were going to lose everything just because of the nature that is doing business with defense at the time.
Yeah, like a speed run greatest hits of all the things that I think are wrong with DoD acquisition and procurement. And honestly, a lot of that, like those are cultural barriers.
I was just going to say that, Simon.
Those are
Culture.
not,
Yeah,
that is not something
exactly.
that you change in the NDAA or an
Yeah,
appropriation bill, because
right.
what you ran up against was personal antibodies.
Right.
And there's a real mismatch. I think about this all the time, even as I watch these very large and exciting reform efforts come down the pipe. And you hear it all the time, right? We got to get rid of requirements, or we have to switch from programs of record to capabilities of record, or we're going to break up the PEOs, we're going to smash them together. What's old is new again. That's all. That's all been done before. And my question is, what are you going to do when the end user, the guy with the gun, says he wants something and the machine doesn't give it to him?
Yep.
What is the lever you pull when your new set of tubes doesn't line up with the changing face of warfare that happens 3, 6, 12 months, 18 months that you have predicted yet? Right? Because I think about, I mean, we were talking about this pretty recently. You had a lot of hearings on the Hill lately. SOCOM came and testified this week. And when that happens, people start talking about the unfunded priorities list. And I can remember unfunded priorities in the SOCOM space back in 2024 that had things like common drone controllers before, before anyone was really thinking. Like the companies on those lists have been acquired. Like the whole landscape has changed in
Yep.
just, and they didn't do really unfunded priorities in FY25 because of the CR. So like since the last time that SOCOM published its unfunded priorities, the world is different. It's moving that fast. And I've yet to see, and we're hopeful. We talk a lot on this podcast about the Speed Act and the Forged Act. These are two, Senate and House bills to do these big muscle acquisition reforms. But I hear stories like yours, and I think about Garrett and I's experience in similar situations. Not always as dire. I mean, you were really trailblazing, and you ran up against what was essentially a mafia inside the DoD, and there's hundreds of them, right? These are institutions that were built post World War II or post Gulf War around, this is the way to do business. We found the thing that works, and this is the way we're going to do business forever. And they entrench.
So, Alex, at some level, I would, again, this is pedestrian from many degrees away, observing you guys operating and growing and stuff. But you made this pivot, and I want to say it was mostly into like insurance, right? Insure tech, and now you're re-exploring and coming back around to doing more national security type stuff. Do you think you're a better company, a more able technology product for the defense enterprise now that you've been through basically the ringer on both sides?
Yeah,
And
what's
like,
attracting you back to the melee that is? I mean, it's much more
Yeah.
crowded now, but there's clearly something there that's
sure.
giving you some optimism.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think, if I could run a playbook back then, I would have seen this earlier. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, what can be their superpower is that they're so emotionally and deeply connected to the product they built and they deliver, and that gives them an amount of grit and stick to it witness that allows them to persevere. That same function can be a detriment, right? When we look against an obstacle and we say we can take this down. And so if I could write the playbook again, it would have been like, do that thing, know that that obstacle is going to be insurmountable at the time, maintain some of the coverage with the SIBRs and the AFWERX vehicles, which were phenomenal, but then do a hard pivot knowing you'll come back to it and focus asthmatically there to know you'll come back to it. That story didn't happen for me. I wish I could tell you that story. So then I saw this ahead of time, and 3-4 quarters ahead, I pivoted. It was more of like 3-4 quarters late. We went down this other road. But the irony is that, what we're doing here, and many people are falling into, a category that's well-defined. And oftentimes I wish I was a part of that ecosystem. It makes it easier to get started. Then you differentiate. Whereas here's a new category, we're calling trust dominance. It's a category in defense and security where Clearspeed can leverage its tech amongst others that will flow into our ecosystem, not our ecosystem, the ecosystem, and provide this mission assurance and these capabilities to protect and safeguard our warfighters. But yeah, like the irony has been that when you pivot in there, and it takes courageous end users, right, to step up and say, I like a reveal, I'm going to give it a shot. And then if I like it, I'm going to advocate for it and pound my fists until I get it. Fortunately, we had some of those folks. And then on the defense side, and then when you get those folks on the insurance side, it magnifies, just as a function of how people can communicate in the market, it magnifies the message and the brand and what you're doing. And because fraud really doesn't go away, it just manifests itself in other areas, what we're able to do is find these passionate first users that happen to be big global carriers in the United Kingdom, for example, and they say, we want to sing it from the mountain because it will push fraud to other competitors. And then we say, that's a really powerful message. The irony has been now that, it really took the changes that have happened, with this change in administration and the forcing function to allow good people, well-intentioned people to actually have the capital to make the changes, have the ability to kind of, get rid of some things that aren't working and be able to, be creative to say, we're actually looking for technology like this, technology that does fraud identification, technology that does, what we call in the enterprise space, trust assurance. So because of your past performance, not on the battlefield in Iraq or Afghanistan or in Somalia or in Kenya, we're really looking for enterprise solutions. And there's a lot more business-minded folks that are now coming into places of government. And what that does is allows them to step back and say, we just need to see metrics that drive, a cost avoidance or an ROI that makes sense to us as business people. And I think this combination of like great long-term government employees that are doing amazing work that just have been hamstrung looking for hacks to marginalize those people that are in the mafia of business as usual, doesn't get me, doesn't hurt me in any way. And then combination of with the entrepreneurial mindset. And it's like, this kind of feels like a game on moment. And so timing and tactics and team are kind of the three things I always think about, like timing and tactics, everything comes down to those two things. And for us, the tactics were pivot to a space where we know we can win free of the mafia of Polygraph, demonstrate the ROI for huge risk-averse enterprise companies that have a demand and, oh, by the way, are driving a bottom line and have to, look after more than just the defense of their people, and kind of using that as an amplification device to now level set as a true dual use tech company, which is, where we are now.
Here's a completely uninformed and total layman hot take. The Polygraph's bullshit. I'll take this and I'll fight this fight with any expert that exists.
Just because you fail every one of them you've ever taken.
I've never known a person that passed it. Or maybe you took one and you've just been holding.
It might be the neighborhood you're from in Richmond, but anyway, Alex, I'd love to hear your comment.
It just seems like a really quacky. It's like a chiropractor, right? Like, yeah, you feel good, but the science is not here.
What I'll say is this. First of all, we do two different things, right? And that was been the hardest thing, is like allowing people to say, you can do that or not do that. That's not my business. I'm playing on the top of the funnel side. And so they're like, well, but that ties to us. And says,
that's the policy problem with the Polygraph, is it is they're cure-all banded. I did the Polygraph. It's done. This problem is over.
The problem is this tool is not a risk screening tool. It's not a risk assessment tool. It's a determinative tool of, are you lying or not? Are you bad guy or not? That's why you fail all these, Simon, because you're clearly, the science is clearly ping on you. But for me, what I would say is like, the first thing is the tool doesn't meet the need. Well, it doesn't meet the need at scale. Like, no one's slapping on. I wasn't like, hey, Captain Smith, throw this Polygraph on one of your Lance Corporal's backs. So when we go out to the Ville, we can vet 100 Taliban, see who the Taliban, what I mean? It's not that tool. Whereas, hey, put this thing in your pocket, integrate to what you already have in the field, and deliver a risk assessment tool to generate a POI list that you wouldn't have otherwise. Like, that's a different thing. And so that's that. The second thing, though, is that, I will say this for the Polygraph, it is the great function of the Polygraph is twofold. Simply put, it's a deterrent tool. If you know that anytime you can't get polyed, you're less likely to do a thing that could come up on a future poly. So it does have an effect of like being a little bit scary and deterring bad behavior, right? The second thing is that it does find, when you're in a setting like that, a lot of people will disclose information they didn't, which is why, folks like CBP have such a hard time hiring people. That's
exactly where my brain is at. That's the main reason I hate poly, is because of CBP. I've interacted with this hiring pipeline.
Yeah, and it's a challenge. Whereas, so you say that those are the two benefits that it has, but then you think to yourself, okay, but how can you affect that further upstream? And so and actually go after the symptom of this thing. You can still achieve a deterrent effect. You can still achieve, but maybe people don't have to go through that thing if they're trusted via other biometric and trust technologies, and they can get touched more often as opposed to every 5 years, and they can get screened in a thoughtful way. And maybe that if someone's high risk through that process, maybe then they go to the secondary screening, which is a poly, and those things could be used until someone comes along and creates a new lie detector, that's kind of the best that we've got. So we either remove it altogether, or we use it in conjunction with other technologies that make it more efficient, because it doesn't scale. It's not me and the meat. You get people in the battlefield going, okay, we can't use Clearspeed. Are you going to send me 100 polygraphers? The answer is we don't have the amount of people, the bandwidth. We can't do it.
So let me ask you this. When you go through this pivot out of the defense space, and you now find yourself sort of giving it, a second look, or maybe a fourth, fifth, 15th look, who knows?
Right.
Your original advocates that were, cheerleading hard for you when you went the first go round, I have to assume that they've moved on to different billets, and then some of them have maybe grown up in the organization, but I'm sure many left the organization, as is the nature of the work we do. Did you find challenges? And oh man, some, like, my best cheerleader has moved on with life, and now I have to like restart this from floor. I think about this a lot from our perspective.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have great folks and they leave that billet, and it's like, oh wow, I have to rebuild this rocket ship because the guy who really believed in it took command somewhere.
Yeah, no, we experienced that mostly at like the true like end user, would get a great use case or have great effect, and then they'd move. We were kind of fortunate that some of the folks that either saw those results or wanted it stayed in. Enough of them stayed in over this journey where we have this kind of council of senior level officers and enlisted leaders that even if they moved, they're still on the call sheet of like, we need this, we need this tool. But so that was a frustration, I think, getting through the SIVR processes. You get a turnover, you're like, oh gosh, we got to like, this is going to cost us a couple months. But overall at the macro level, because it wasn't our focus, we had a patient view of it. And we said, this is going to take a couple of years. So let's build a coalition. Let's stack the data points and the proof points. But yeah, it does continue to be a challenge, and you're actively moving against, I call them an adversary, an adversary that isn't sleeping, right? They're actively also trying to discredit you, discredit your technology, shut you down where you can. And so people need to kind of raise up and meet that level with a challenge back. Is it illegal to use? No. Can I use it? Yes. Well, we're not selling it. They're not.
That's one of those things that I feel like it's almost like a polite society conversation that none of us really want to have, where it's like, it's easy to sort of paint this broad stroke like there's a boogeyman out there. Right. But when you want to really put a fine point on it, it's incumbent systems. It is those incumbent legacy systems who are actively kneecapping, and they're protecting their profits, they're protecting their revenue, but they're not playing nice, and we see it across a huge number. Sometimes it's benign, sometimes it's not. I mean, I think about things like the A10, for example, which has like a whole cult fan base of people who rally around it. And then it also has a similar population of detractors who really dislike the A10 for a number of different reasons. And those folks just go to war entirely without like reasoned debate. It's just like, I like the sound of it, I'm going to go yell at some people. I'm calling my congressman.
Right.
Alex, so we're talking a bit about like the antibodies, right? And the barriers to entering what in 2018, 2019, even 2020 was a pretty brutal market for new entrants, defense, national security, all that stuff. We found that back then there was a lot of education needed on the investor side. In other words, a few big things had happened. Shield AI had happened. Obviously, Palantir had been around for quite a while with, all the kind of deep-pocketed Silicon Valley backers that it had. But Anduril came up in 2016, 2017. The investor community was like active, but uncertain. And so there was a lot of education going on. And like, because of that dynamic, we realized we were going to have to bootstrap a little bit longer than maybe was comfortable. But we weren't going to give up on kind of the national security mission. So we had to bootstrap because we weren't going to go outside of that market. We had a clear thesis, but we did have to like really fight and scrap for venture money because they didn't understand. The venture investor community just didn't know what this thing was. Fast forward a few years, I think that has changed dramatically. Like the amount of risk capital that's flowing from everything from defense pure to category agnostic to defense curious to whatever investors, like the cork has really been popped on venture capital. I think it's just heating up too. I think it's becoming more frothy, and it's becoming, especially with the new Trump administration. And you mentioned of kind of the new status quo is a bias toward dual use commercial solutions, software acquisition pathways, like all that stuff. What was your experience in the venture community? And then I'm going to use that as maybe a pivot into the rest of the talk track for the agenda for the conversation today, and maybe move off of Clearspeed by background. But what was your,
Yeah.
was it marketplace education? What was it? Your investor contacts in those years?
Yeah, I mean, from this first time we took a seed, and we also had a bootstrap phase to the company. Two primary kind of end pitches landed with someone everyone knows by name and knows their firm, and someone no one knows. We went with the kind of less well known for reasons aligned with, these people seem more patient. They seem to have more imagination. They seem to be aligned with our values. They seem to be able to help us what we need to do in the next 2 to 3 years. And what we did with that was kind of the die was cast for us to be kind of contrarian, because we didn't fit, how we were building the company didn't fit, really the return profile and the kind of profile. So that was like our line of departure, kind of out from, the Sand Hill Road Club. And I think, like, broadly, it's when you look at it objectively, I think you can say that they're running now to this market. They're late. I think that most of the people in that community has lost their imagination and their spine, frankly. The idea of like moving fast to building dumb. I think about, really there's like a culture of elite technology capital providers that kind of stare down their nose at, some of these folks doing the hard work. I mean, we're not iterating in, a lab in Berkeley. We're in Afghanistan, we're in Ukraine, like we're in these places, and these people can't understand that you're putting your life on the line, right? But you kind of have this kind of tech elite, and they kind of opted out of the patriotism game, and you could probably tie it exactly to the funding of their own funds, often rife with money from China, right? And so
Can we talk shit on Microsoft real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because this is the thing I think a lot in this space, and there's obviously some news right now about Microsoft's recent use of Chinese IT support and different Chinese labor elements to support services that they're providing to DoD.
Microsoft doesn't own Rip It, right? If they do, we don't want to shit talk.
No, I've checked that ownership chain. As long as we can't talk shit on LaCroix,
that's what it is.
Yeah, that's who owns Rip It.
That's right.
Spicy water guys. But I always think about Microsoft when this particular frame comes up, because Microsoft's revenue from the DoD is a fraction of their revenue from the commercial side of the world. So they are heavily disincentivized from a capitalist perspective to take seriously anything the DoD says. Like the pitch is, we make the best in the world. You can buy it or not. I use something other than Outlook. Go ahead, figure it out yourself. And DoD is such a mammoth that it's so risk averse that like they're just paralyzed into, all right, just keep buying Microsoft, and I guess we'll never call them on their bullshit. But I think about this with Garrett and what a lot of Garrett and I's conversations about venture capital and venture in the defense space, and it makes me wonder, what is the ability of the defense market to modify venture behaviors? Because I do think there is huge venture opportunities in this defense space, but I don't think it's going to look like what it has looked like in past years. Garrett, we talk a lot about, right, there needs to be meaningful contracts. There needs to be these things, but they haven't shown up. But more venture money keeps pouring in, so there's a certain amount of like, there's clearly a higher risk tolerance that doesn't exist if this was a pure commercial market. Like by now they would have said, hey, we're not seeing meaningful purchase of your goods. But there's something else happening that I think causes them to continue to go, no, it's worth, the ones that are interested, it's worth sticking around.
And I mean, isn't it very clearly that they think the big home runs and the grand slams are going to own gigantic market share in a large and growing multi-trillion-dollar global defense spending market, right? So like in Anduril is a good example.
Yeah, maybe.
They're not going to deliver liquidity to their early investors on the schedule that a normal venture-backed startup would. That's in part by design. Their early investors know this. They were many of the same people who did Palantir, which took decades to go, public and to return liquidity to investors. So I think this is different. You're right. I think it's It's a smaller number of giant outcomes that own multi-decade market share, and the investors need to be more patient. And of course, like there'll be secondary liquidity options along the way and all kinds of other kind of mechanisms. But like you're right, this is not a 3 to 7 year sprint to get the next big SaaS penetration and then sell it for $1.6 billion cash. Like that's not what this market is all about. And additionally, like we just saw the Reindustrialize conference go this past week, and that's all about it's in part about investing in the revitalization of an American manufacturing and like physical creation market, and revitalizing the Rust Belt, right? And that's why it was held in wherever it was, Detroit.
It's like its second year out in Detroit too.
And in part, this is why there's an incentive for Anduril to invest in and build Arsenal One, their giant robotics manufacturing plant in Ohio. These are places where there's a legacy and a history of building physical goods, and that is a very different thing than what Silicon Valley's been investing in for the last 2-3 decades, which has mostly been internet-related SaaS and the like, and software. But
and that's the strategic frame I have, Garrett. Like just to end on this is that, there was a time when people say the next Silicon Valley could be in in Austin, or maybe it's Huntsville or Tampa or something. There's so much amazing chemistry.
Can't be Huntsville, dude. Really?
Magic that happens. Well, whatever,
Huntsville,
Montana. But the point is that there's so much good happening in the North Bay in California, and there's a lot of reasons why. And then there's also our most brilliant minds in venture capital are typically at these firms doing this thing. So I think the problem isn't that that we need to move or shift. I mean, part of it could be a hybrid. Like you need to find alternative sources of patient capital. And I have a theory on that for another time. But ultimately, if you have the brightest minds, the smartest people on the planet, these men and women that are working on how to get your groceries 8 minutes faster, while our adversaries are building weapons that can deny us global freedom of movement, like then you're talking about like a true problem that I think they're starting to wake up to. And so if you say, okay, the next war is going to come, or at least we need to avoid it or prepare for it, like how do we redirect this imagination, this talent, this capital towards what is mission critical innovation, like truly where Silicon Valley was started. And you're going to find that when these things you guys just talked about happen, and I think that's the bets they're making, but it's too slow. This requires guts and courage. It requires a different way to think about the problem, but they're going to have amazing returns for the folks that make the bets now, early, and often. So in any event, it's a part of this, I think, movement towards education, understanding, and really you just need a new crop of folks that come up that are harder, that just have it in their heart, like this is the right thing to do, and all LP-based will benefit from it.
What's that cycle that people always talk about? Hard times make soft men make soft times make hard men.
Nailed it.
I forget what the cycle.
Nailed it.
Yeah,
I did too early for war in the Middle East, born too late for war in the Middle East, born just in time for a war in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Is that the one?
No, that's not exactly it, but I think that captures the sentiment pretty good. But no, so this is obviously a hard endeavor. It takes a lot of parties, a lot of stakeholders in it, and I am glad that things are trending in a positive direction for national security, energy, and talent going to national security problems, which includes the risk capital ecosystem. But it's not easy. I mean, Alex, you lost all your hair. I have to go clean shaven nowadays because I'm totally gray, and Simon's too young to have experienced any of those effects. So we'll see in 5 to 10 years.
Never going to happen. Simon's pretty much bulletproof at this point.
Yeah, you just keep pounding that monster, dude. You just keep pounding that monster. Okay, so I'm going to move into deal book kind of venture, whatever, deal book topics. Only two really that I had here. The first was the Reindustrialize conference. Alex, you weren't there. Did you go to that? Or you were there?
I didn't. No, I didn't.
Well, maybe there's nothing much to talk about. I'm very interested in what this like physical, the renaissance as it touches like physical hard good manufacturing, especially in the national security space, and how that evolves.
I am heading to the Union factory launch tomorrow, so
cool.
I'll be there with those guys. They're doing an America Builds kind of factory launch, so I'm excited to see that. I know nothing about manufacturing, but it's important, and so I'm excited to start learning more. Yeah,
that's our buddy
Joe Musselman.
Joe Musselman.
Right.
Joe Musselman.
Right. Great name, Joe. Wherever you happen to be. Awesome name.
He's a handsome guy. He's doing great things.
He's very handsome. Last time I saw him, he was looking very tan. He was wearing a pinstripe double-breasted suit.
The
And
guy
God
dresses
bless
great.
that guy.
He dresses
God
great.
bless him. He's part of the ecosystem. Very interested in that. We talked last week. This is a slight deviation to my talk track here, but last week we talked about Dan Maggie and Firestorm Labs. They're down in your neck of the woods, Alex. They were kind of the biggest, most recent venture financing round of note. I think they raised just under $50 million to go into this next phase, and we wish them well. Just again, a side note: Clearspeed is a Series C company, Series D, Series C.
Series D.
Series D. So yeah, man, you have been deeper and longer in that trench than I have been, and battle scars, I'm sure. So last item here on the venture deal beat. I'm sure that the community can send me notes if I'm missing really important, critical kind of deal book stuff. But Booz Allen Hamilton and their venture capital arm, Booz Allen Ventures, which is a CVC. Disclaimer: they're strategic investors in Reveal. Did you ever take Booz money, Alex? You got?
I didn't, but they're phenomenal from what I hear, and I know a few of the folks over there, so they're doing great things.
Yeah. So yesterday or 2 days ago, they announced a $200 million plus up to their fund. They're still running out of I think, quote, fund one. And there are rumors about what's coming beyond a fund one. But it's interesting to me to reflect on this kind of what do the legacy players do in an era of Doge, right? And I know that those guys are thinking long and hard about it. And Brian McCarthy, head of Booz Allen Ventures, he's been a co-host or guest co-host on this podcast before, and he'll be on next week. I'm going to ask him some of these questions or kind of pull on some of these threads. But in an era of Doge, and like there's nothing more maybe Doge worthy than a large systems integrator that sells labor, seats or engineering services seats on large prime contracts, and it's very interesting to me, like how do these businesses retool their entire business configuration to go after maybe more IP rich endeavors where they can move off of services contracts and towards something different. So it appears to me, and this is again like view from the street, it appears to me that Booz is going to be allocating more of its resourcing into its venture arm. What that means downstream, I guess, time will tell, but it's certainly them retooling things in an interesting way. Do you guys have any maybe observations on
this? Won't shock you
that
I don't have a huge number of interactions with the services side of Booz. But through our work, I've interacted a fair amount both with the venture side and the products side of Booz, which I think through some interesting acquisitions, Booz has built a kind of interesting stable of products focused folks in this kind of IP rich space, which I think is really interesting. I think it's a really.
You mean like they acquired Pargov last year? Is that one of the things you're
exactly right? Folks like that, they built this product center in Northern Virginia that's focused on tactical products and tactical solutions, right? And these are hard goods by and large. There's some software in there as well. And I think it's an interesting thing to see a company that large thinking about what does the pivot look like. I think it says a lot about what's happening in the DoD acquisition space and what's happening in the DoD tech buying space, where you're seeing some of these like really mammoth giants stop and go, okay, what do I need to build to make sure I'm catching that wave? I think it says a lot about that wave. And you even see it with, I think the mediums are really cleaning up in the space. When we talk about folks like AeroVironment, we talk about folks like Kratos, they are for sure acquiring and trying to orient their businesses, and they're a little bit more nimble than something as big as a Booz. But they're going to do everything they can to color themselves as non-traditionals. And they probably haven't been a non-traditional in the way we think of it in 60, 70 years. Right. But the new laws that are coming down could allow them to rebrand as a non-traditional in perpetuity if they align their business practices to the definitions that are coming down in these acquisition reforms, like the Forged Act. Yeah. For those listening at home, if you haven't looked at the Forged Act and the way that they're going to redefine non-traditional contractor, you absolutely should, right? It's going to change the way the game is played for a lot of folks.
The surprise to me, and this was an offline conversation with you, Simon, the surprise for me was somehow Anduril falls into a non-traditional category, even though, private valuation, they're in excess of $30 billion of
yeah, it's not about size of company.
And they're thousands. I don't think we're tens of thousands yet of employees at Anduril, but they're trending that way, right? They're going to be there. And that's like, the fact that they can be a non-traditional contractor and so can a reveal at like 70 employees time now, right? Like that's a pretty big gap.
It's a pretty fascinating way of using government regulations as like a market driver.
Sure.
And, our good friend Peter Dixon had said this to me once, that capitalism is not working inside the DoD. And I don't disagree with him, right? Like competition does not operate the same way inside of the government marketplace that it does in the commercial space. And the government has not only the ability, but I generally think the responsibility to use its tools to shape it in a certain way. These are not things where they can afford to be like, we're going to let the chips fall where they may, and we're going to see what you guys produce. Like, no, you have to produce. You have to make sure something comes out of this. These capabilities are essential to national security. And I think particularly with this idea of redefining the non-traditional, one of the aspects of it, it's not the only one, but it is, you can get non-traditional declaration by spending more IRAD, by spending your own company dollars. So literally this method of doing business that most of us in this like startup space think of as a best practice to more quickly build capability and put it in the user's hand. Congress, the government, has the ability to look at all contractors and say, hey, we'll give you some preferential treatment if you do that thing. And that can be really powerful with best practices.
Go ahead, Alex. Yeah.
No, just take on here. So, and I'm getting really excited about like the neo primes, Anduril and these folks. I think because they're more receptive to talking to scale ups and startups in general, just because that's where they came from. And so you have now a new place to go. Whereas, okay, if we have to get into government contract X, we have to talk to services provider Y and do the dance. And so if you look industry wide, and I kind of do have the benefit of seeing this on the enterprise side as well. PwC is doing it right, and disclosure, they are a partner of ours, but they're like, Mohammed Kande, their chairman, is really great vision, and he's striking out, and by not striking out, he's like striking out into the market. Like he's having great effect, talking about how the curation of services paired with AI and delivery of new tech will be the thing, and he's leading there. They're leading there on the enterprise side. You bring it into the government. You saw this announced this week. Palantir partnered with Deloitte. I think that's great. I'm interested to learn more about that partnership. Deloitte also partner. They're trying to reimagine how they're doing business. But I'll end with this. This is like a story told to me that I want to share with the audience here. And it was, a year ago, we were told by a service provider, listen, Alex, this is a movie. And in the movie, we and those like us are the main actors and the supporting actors. We're the movie. The script's written for us. We deliver it. And this is our stage. And we have character actors. Do you know what a character actor? He said condescendingly. I said, no, I don't know what character actor is. He said, they're the people that you know their face and they do a great job supporting the lead actors. And they really bring the movie together, but you're not there. You're not the reason why the movie's being made. And I said, okay, I guess I'm a character actor and let's play this game. No effect, no impact, no results. Then this change happens. And all of a sudden, no one wants those main actors anymore. Like the movies that are being written now were about like, what can you do to actually to find fraud, to like drive bottom line, to increase automation, to be able to introduce new technologies that help the people that I do have that haven't been, retired or been moved out. Like, how can we do this thing at scale the same way the enterprise does? And so, now we're able to come in and say, hey, we might be the main actor in every movie, but certainly there's a couple of movies where they're not asking for you anymore. And it was kind of like a sweet irony. And you don't want to push that too far down the throats because things change and you do need some services components can be good. And there can be a great way to elegantly do change management that, often is needed by some of these experts. But gone are the days where those people are the main and supporting actors. And thank God, because now a new cast of characters is going to come up and the character actors are going to be those folks. Hey, in the side, we'll call you if we need you. You may have something we need. Let's see how we can play together to bring the customer the best value. It's all changed. And I love that these scripts are being written on a daily basis in DC and all around.
Stretching that analogy to its breaking point.
I was about to do something to this. Yeah, go ahead.
It's Philip Seymour Hoffman. Yeah. It's one of the greatest character actors that ever lived. But one day you just wake up and realize he's the one I want to see here.
That's right.
He's blowing everybody else out of the water in every movie I ever saw him in. And it's exactly what jumped to my mind. Hey, Garrett, I'm fascinated to know where you want to go with it.
But if you could be Tom Cruise or Brad Pitt or George Clooney, I mean, wouldn't you want to be? I mean, even a retired version of those guys is living a pretty good life.
I think you're right, and I think it's like the next gen Brad Pitt, right? Like who's going to come up, and the next gen Brad Pitt might be the Neo Prime. might be the Androll, it might be the Palantirs, it might be these folks that are rising.
So
up,
we talk about
whatever you
Tom
want.
Cruise a lot on this podcast.
We used to. We need to bring that back. You're right.
I'm going to bring it back right now
Yeah, please
because
do. Please
Tom,
do.
one of my favorite Tom Cruise anecdotes, right, was that he did he did Risky Business, which was huge, this massive movie, and then he did supporting roles. He dropped back and he did Rain Man, stuff like that, where he wasn't the main character. It wasn't until Top Gun. He did like a whole run of movies as a supporting character, Cocktail, things like that, which I think is another interesting stretch to the analogy of like, yeah, you could be the lead guy and ruin it for everybody and muscle everyone out. What's your longevity look like now, where people are really sick of that mentality, and where otherwise you could take a step back, be a supporting role, and if you're a legacy midsize or large prime, there's a ton of opportunity for you to occupy those spaces and remain competitive in a way.
Not
where
only
you,
that, Tom Cruise was not only a legendary like protagonist in movies. He has one of the most legendary antagonist roles ever in the
he's
history
got
of
to
cinema.
do more antagonist roles.
I
That's
don't
the
know.
only
You need
comment.
just a little bit.
I guess it comes down to like read the script, read the room,
Right.
and instead of Tom Cruise forcing himself as the main actor into everything like some of these services companies tried to do and have done in the past, it's like right now read the room. No one wants you to show up to give them PowerPoint presentations and cobble together some idea you can't deliver on, right? And you're not creating the technology that's going to answer what the plot line needs to be, which is find fraud, waste, and abuse, hire at scale, screen people coming in and out of the country, like do these kinds of things. And that's where you got to read the room, and they need to be sophisticated enough to say, all right, I got this many Academy Awards on the shelf. We're like, dude, we don't care. This is a new movie.
Yeah.
So humble character actor that can step up when needed.
Aging
Right.
gracefully. Right.
Right.
Actually,
Right. So we'll still launch through the credit lines to bring some of the older
Yeah.
folks in.
You can play Alfred now. You can't be
Yes.
Batman anymore.
That's right.
that's pretty good. Andy Serkis never played Batman. I don't think you're referencing anything in particular though, so don't worry about it. All right, last topic. I think we wanted to pivot a bit to the extent that there's content to cover, Simon, into your wheelhouse, which is everything Capitol Hill, NDAA, etc.
I'll do a short
toss to you. Go for it.
Yeah, I'll do a short update on what's happening on the Hill, and then there's one thing in particular that I think might be worth a conversation here. But the House and the Senate have both finished their NDAAs, the National Defense Authorization Act that sets the policy for the DoD. Neither of them look like they're going to go to the floor, which is where they'll get a huge list of amendments. So not quite done before August. So we're going to go into August recess, take the whole thing off. The House goes into recess at the end of this week, and we'll come back in September. This is not great way to run the rocket ship, if I'm being honest. The fiscal year ends in October. The National Defense Authorization bills and the funding bills need to be done, or supposed to be done, before the end of September.
I have never described our government or the Congress as a rocket ship.
So that's weird because who do you think went to the moon first?
It's not
government.
Congress.
It was us. This is all government people.
Okay, all right. I
No,
concede.
space,
I
no
concede.
SpaceX back
I
then.
concede.
But so we did see some movement on funding, though. So the Senate did a procedural vote this week on the military construction and the Veterans Affairs bill. That's the first bill to go to floor consideration. Both chambers have been kind of marking up and towing around the edges of their appropriations bills. It was a 90-2 vote or 90-8. Sorry, my math there is not great. 90-8 to turn to consideration of that appropriations bill. You have some Democrats who are really wringing their hands about playing nice with the Trump administration on funding. 90-8 is a procedural vote. It's not a vote for the bill to pass. So I think we're going to see, if any, fireworks probably next week. It'll be interesting. I don't think we're going to pass a whole lot of appropriations bills this month. It, again, is something that's going to be kicked down the road to September. And I don't think they have enough time on the clock. So more CRs. More CRs.
I was going to say, what are we forecasting that that President Trump basically has no intention of signing any bills that come through? Or
those bills won't make it to his desk. I don't think they're going to be able to get them past the floor of both chambers.
Even by their much delayed kind of trend line delivery timelines of like early after, or actually a lot of them get delivered to the president before the end of the calendar year and are signed sometime in the following calendar year.
Yeah.
Is that the trend? Is that the trend we should expect, or do you think it just doesn't get to his desk ever, or do you think even if it gets to his desk, he doesn't sign it?
So if it gets to his desk, he signs it. I don't see a scenario where a Republican-led House and Senate produce full-on laws that are so egregious that the president shoots them down in the funding space.
Mm-hmm.
I think the harder problem, of course, is that I expect there to be some pretty deep cuts to domestic spending coming out of the House, and those are going to be very hard to make it through the Senate. And I expect the Senate to be spending more money than the right wing of the House is willing to tolerate. And I think there's going to be an impasse there. You need 60 votes to move any appropriations bills through the Senate, and that's for big bills, and that's also for a CR. So I think you're going to have everyone's favorite weeks and weeks of articles about the shutdown and whether or not it's going to happen, and oh no, the sky is falling. So that'll be fun. We'll talk about it a lot on the podcast when we get there. But the long story short is no news in July. Nothing's going into law before August recess, so we're gonna pick it back up in September.
I think we need to clear speed all these members, like get all the members in the entirety of the Senate, all 400 some odd House members, whatever. Just clear speed them all.
You get to trust faster. We get well out of greens,
That's right. That's right.
Now,
and if they don't, and then they can't be on the ballot, next time. If they don't clear that bar, they can't be on the ballot.
Now, aside from the general news, though, there was one really interesting thing that happened on the Hill this week, which is that the entire New Jersey congressional delegation, except for I think one member, signed a letter, a 5-page letter to the Secretary of the Army, Dan Driscoll, voicing their concerns about the Army's intent to reform the acquisition process and specifically to reform the program executive office around munitions and ammunitions.
Because Picatinny's in New Jersey.
Because Picatinny's in New Jersey, and there's a couple of very, I think, interesting topics nestled into this. The first of which is, of course, that the plan by Dan Driscoll would modify, but in a lot of ways reduce what Picatinny does, and kind of reduce Picatinny to just focusing on small arms ammo as opposed to having all service, all ammunition, which really we're talking about munitions, right? 155 rounds. That's like the big pole in the tent right now at the moment, which means a big loss of jobs in New Jersey. It means, a big loss of sort of DoD stroke. But the flip side, and the point that the New Jersey delegation is making, is that Picatinny became this consolidated be-all, end-all in the early 2000s in response to prior acquisition reform efforts. So there's I think we lose sight of this a lot when we talk about DoD acquisition reform. This is not new, right? The number of commissions and reports and efforts, at least since 1960, right, which was the first time we tried to meaningfully do that without a war to inspire fast movement. Of course, Vietnam did happen not long after under McNamara, but it does. It's the first time where I've taken a pause and gone, okay, yeah, I was really excited about these reforms of the PEOs and the joint PEOs, and now I'm thinking, what did it look like 20 years ago when I was, enlisting in the Marine Corps? Wasn't quite thinking about these topics yet. Are we breaking a system that we built to fix this? We're just in a circle? I'm not sure.
You have to burn the village to save the village, Simon.
Sure. So you can have room to build the village. How am I going to build a village when this village is in the way of my village plans?
That's right.
Yeah. I think it's going to be really interesting. I think you're going to see a lot more of that. I mentioned the A10 earlier. There are constituencies for everything. The most banal, annoying office in the world is like the pillar of a community somewhere in small town America. And there are 2 senators and at least 1 representative every time that's going to let you know about it. Strap in. I think it's going to get tougher from here. It's not going to get easier.
I've always wondered if the A10 was a platform that the Marines could use. The Marines are great at accepting hand-me-down gifts that are just way too old.
It would be
making them more and squeezing value out of them for.
It would squeeze
decades.
Money out of the Marine Corps, and they would not squeeze value out of the A10, which is why they turned it down. And I had some really interesting interactions with the Marine Corps.
Kind of a joke, but yeah.
Well, the Air Force used to have the light attack experiment that they were thinking about, right? And the Marine Corps looked very heavily at that. And once upon a time, I worked for a Montana senator, And in my fondest fantasies, I was like, man, if we could get some of these light attack aircrafts stationed in Montana, this would be like a great fit for different special operations training elements that come out to the state.
Did he pat you on the shoulder and say, "Oh, Simon"?
Yeah. We had a bunch of different thoughts, but the Marine, he gave me free reign to go explore it. As I got into it, there's a historied flying mission in Great Falls, Montana, and it's a perfect example of that delegation will fight tooth and nail to make sure that mission doesn't go away because it's the last flying mission they have. Sure. And so you're always thinking about, from a political perspective, how safe are these jobs and this opportunity to participate in the country's national defense. It means a lot to people. But the Marine Corps was unwilling to give up even the single squadron of F-16s that they would have needed to pay for light attack. And they're like, yeah, it looks like a lot of fun. It would do a lot of good stuff for us. But money-wise, I would have to kill something else. I don't have any extra cash lying around, so I'm not going to do that.
Well, the Marine Corps has never been accused of being nimble and flush with cash, either of those things. All right. It's been a great conversation, gents. Alex, I want to give you the last word before we finally wrap, but I've enjoyed this conversation quite a bit.
Yeah, in closing, I think conversations like this are critical. I think they're happening a lot and everywhere, which makes this pod so exciting for me. It kind of allows it to bring it into our cars and into our offices and so on. And so keep up the great work, guys. I love the pod.
You really classed us up today, Alex. I just want to say you brought the collective class.
Yeah, you added some respectability to my t-shirt collection. It was
at minimum, he brought a collar, which is often not seen on this forum. But okay, Alex, thank you for joining us. You're welcome back anytime, especially if there are any big announcements or things you want to shout from our minor rooftop. So with that, please give us a follow, subscribe, like us, whatever the heck you do in Podcastistan, and refer us to your buddies. We want more people in on this conversation, and send us notes. Looking forward to chatting next week, and we'll see you. Adios.